Pastor Deborah Trakel. I've been ordained about 24 years. Also, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So in that capacity, I was the Director of Client Services, Clinical Services for the Milwaukee LGBT Community Center. And in that capacity, I have done hundreds of these kinds of presentations. And what it is that I want to be talking to you about today is LGBTQIAA+++. I want to use those letters and the definitions of those letters as a launching pad to talk about sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, and the intersection of all of that. In terms of God's marvelous creation and how God has created all of us. So it's been my experience that when we think about LGBTQIAA++, people look at those letters and they say, what do they all mean? Or some people think that they know what they all mean and actually don't. So what I'm going to do is take those letters apart and talk to you about them, and then talk about the intersection of all of them. Does that work? Excellent. So LGBTQ are the letters that you will frequently see when we're talking about the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer community. All right? And as we look at those 5 letters, and then what's not up here is I, A, A++. And we'll get to those in a few minutes. But in order, L stands for lesbian. Lesbian would be a woman who is predominantly, almost exclusively attracted emotionally and sexually to other women. G is one of those complex words because you know how the English language has lots of different meanings for different words. So G stands for gay. So gay can mean the whole LGBTQIAA++ community, sort of as a shorthand word. Gay can also mean a gay male. It's usually used predominantly for a homosexual male. Or G can also be used for a homosexual female, though lesbian is the predominantly preferred word. But one might say if one was a lesbian, I'm gay. One might say if one were a male and homosexual, I'm gay. Or one could talk about the gay community, which means all y'all, in terms of that whole large tent. B stands for bisexual. And bisexual means someone who is attracted to either gender. So if you're a woman, you could be attracted to a male or a woman. Or if you're a male, you could be attracted to a male or a woman. Though not necessarily equally. So people think that bisexual means equally attracted to both genders. It doesn't mean that. It simply means somebody who can be emotionally and sexually attracted to either gender. Right? I'm going to come back to T, which means transgender, and we'll talk about that more because that's the one that people have the most confusion about. And then Q. So Q stands for queer, or it stands for questioning, but usually it stands for queer. And queer is one of those words that when I was young, so I'm old now as you all know, but when I was young, queer was an epithet. It was a bad word. You wouldn't, if you said, no, you're queer, that was bad. You didn't do that. It was along all those words that we know that we're not supposed to say. You know, there's words for African Americans, we don't use those words. There's words for people that are Mexican, we don't use those words. Well, queer was that way when I was growing up. But it isn't anymore. The kids have appropriated the word queer to mean I don't conform to the normative, whatever that is, the normative way of being in the world. I'm not necessarily male or female. I'm not necessarily gay or straight. I'm queer, say the kids. When I was working at the center, I tell the story that we had a large group of kids who identified as LGBTQ, and so they were in one part of the building, and then we had a large group of seniors. And if we wanted to have fun every once in a while, we would get the two groups together, assuming that the senior LGBTQ folks would be able to impart some wisdom to the kids, and vice versa. And if we really wanted to have fun, what we would do is throw the word queer into the middle of the conversation, because the seniors would become distressed immediately. Oh, that's a horrible word, you can't use that word. And the kids are like, dude, what's wrong? Queer, it's a good word, no problem with it. You know, yeah, I'm queer, deal with it, dude. So queer is now a word that's been reappropriated by the LGBTQ community as a word which simply means, I don't conform to your understandings of how I should be as a woman or a man, as a male or a female, or as gay or straight. I'm somewhere else. I'm queer. So I want to come back to these, if you will, and talk a little bit about the T, because that will get us into a discussion about sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression, all of which are three separate categories, but they intersect. So if you will allow me. So when we talk about sexual orientation, a man named Alfred Kinsey, back in the 50s and 60s, thank you for nodding, a man named Alfred Kinsey came up with what is known as the Kinsey scale. And it goes from 0 to 6. 0 would be 100% heterosexual. And 6 would be 100% homosexual. Okay? But what Kinsey discovered in his research was that there are virtually an infinitesimally small group of people that are either Kinsey zeros or Kinsey 6. When I was young and just coming out myself, there were T-shirts that said I'm a Kinsey 6, which meant, you know, I'm 100% homosexual. But the truth is that very, very, very few people are 100% heterosexual or 100% homosexual. Most of us are, although we have strong inclinations one way or the other, and we have strong identities one way or the other, are exactly a 0 or a 6. We fall somewhere in the middle. And so when the kids identify as queer, they're saying just that. Yeah, I'm somewhere here. Yeah, I'm somewhere on this line, but I don't know exactly where I am. I just know that I'm somewhere on the line. I'm queer. The sexual orientation, meaning to whom and how we are physically and romantically attracted, intersects with our gender identity. So we'll call this, and so this is the matrix. So this is gender identity, and so we'll say this would be 100% male, and this 100% female, or at least in terms of how one identifies. And then gender expression is the third thing, which is how do I express myself? So if I were to ask y'all, what are some things that would typically be understood as female gender expression? I'm looking at the three of you right now. All three of you are wearing makeup, right? So, and generally, we would say that wearing makeup is a way of identifying as female. Earrings. I don't see either of these two guys wearing earrings, but earrings, you know, as it used to be a way of identifying as female. And all four of us are all wearing earrings, and those two are not. But you know, now that's gender expression is loosening up a little bit, and so there are some men who are wearing earrings, and we don't think anything about it. We just think that they're men wearing earrings, right? So, although some people might wonder then, because that's a different gender expression than even our culture is used to. So gender expression is so societally and culturally bound. if you go to other countries, and most of you have traveled, I think all of you have traveled, you know that there are different ways of expressing one's gender, whether one is male or female and identifies as male or female, in different ways. So we'll come back to that when we talk about more specifically transgender. So here's the thing. There is a distinction to be made. We're going to come back to this. Use up all the sentence paper. Between transgender and cisgender. So I don't know if anybody remembers their high school trigonometry or algebra. The words trans and cis. So trans, cross, cis, in alignment. So gender identity is created out of more than just genitals. When we think about gender, we have tended to think about whether somebody has a penis or whether one doesn't have a penis, right? When a child is born, the person who is birthing that baby, the first thing that they're looking for is whether that child has or doesn't have a penis. If it has a penis, it's a boy. You've got a boy. Or if it doesn't, you've got a girl, right? But the thing is that gender is not just about penises or vaginas or lack thereof in either event. And so that when people talk about the biology of gender, what makes me female or makes you male, there's more than just our genitals. So we look at our brain, and it really is, men really do have different brains than women do. You know, there are those books, men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Well, there is truth to that. Brain structure is different in males than it is in females. That's biology, yes? Though you can't see it at birth. And then there is the endocrine system, or our hormones. Again, you can't see that at birth. You can't see whether how much androgen a child has. You can't see how much estrogen a child has or will have. You can't see, it's all internal, right? So you can't see that. And then there is our chromosomes, or our DNA makeup. Again, you can't see inside me to see whether I'm XX, or look inside Bob or Ted and see whether or not they're XY. You can't see that at birth. You couldn't see that at any of our births. And so, but the truth is that our chromosomal makeup, if you think about now, those of you who have read about the genotyping and the gene mapping and how utterly complex our internal chromosomal nature is, our DNA, our fundamental biology, how utterly complex it is. You think about the tiniest little quirk on a chromosome is what gives me blue eyes and gives, anybody here does that, but you have green eyes, don't you? What do you have? Brown. Brown, okay, and gives Ted brown eyes, right? The tiniest little quirk on a chromosome makes the difference. And as you look at one's gene mapping, all of the things that make us us are within our DNA, our chromosomal makeup, including our gender. So if you look at the XX female, or the XY chromosomal makeup, imagine, if you will, that just one little thing there makes a difference in terms of how I experience myself, how I understand myself as a woman or as a man. Statistically, most folks do say, that the gender that they are assigned at birth corresponds to the gender that they themselves experience. And those people are cisgender. So though I would identify as lesbian and gay, I would also identify as cisgender. At birth, I was assigned female, which is to say I don't have a penis. There, I know something about me. So I was assigned a female at birth, and that corresponds to my internal experience. So I identify as a woman, as cisgender, okay? So cisgender means non-trans, but not to stigmatize the trans community, we talk about being cisgender. So the transgender individual is somebody who experiences themselves and is different than what they were assigned at birth. Remember that this is all the biology of somebody who is any gender at all. Our gender comes out of our brain, our endocrine system, our hormonal system, our chromosomal makeup, and our genitals. When they're all in alignment, then that's cisgender. When they're not all in alignment, when our internal biological experience is different than that which we were assigned at birth, then some people say, and they say it at the earliest ages. You know, a 4-year-old can say, you know, I don't want to wear a dress, Mommy. Because they learn that gender expression is associated with female, and they don't feel female, they feel male, though they may have been assigned female at birth. The way that we language that is, and I hope this changes because it's confusing, but male to female or female to male. And the reason that's confusing is because it implies that somebody is born male and becomes female, or is born female and becomes male, and that is not what happens. What happens is that a child is born, and all of this is what's going on inside of them that we cannot see, and at some point in time, they themselves realize, come to the experience of themselves as other than that which they were assigned at birth. But that other than other than what they were assigned at birth is who they are. So it's not like a man becomes a woman or a woman becomes a man. It's that a woman, a female, who was assigned female at birth really was male in terms of these other things that we can't see. Okay? Now, back to this line right now. This is the gender and binary, and you will hear and you read about the gender binary. You'll hear people say, I reject the gender binary. I'm not on the gender binary. I don't affirm the gender binary, or any kinds of words that reject an easy identity of male or female. So our kids, for example, at the center, as the LGBTQ center, as they're coming to grips with who they are as human beings, many of them would say, I'm not on the binary, which simply means I don't claim a male identity, I don't claim a female identity, I'm somewhere else. I may be here, I may be here, but I'm not on the binary. I don't correspond to exclusively understanding myself as cisgender male or exclusively understanding myself as cisgender female. And those individuals often will play with gender expression, right? Play with it meaning that they'll try out different things because it fits with not fitting on the binary. Now that male-female, our gender identity, intersects with our sexual orientation. They're different concepts. Gender identity is who I am, and sexual orientation is who I love and who I'm sexual with. And that's clearly a different concept. So while this is a binary and people can be at different places on it, this too is a binary and people can be at different places on it. And all of this is God's creation. You know, all of it is God's creation. And we just don't get to put God in a box and say, well, God only creates cisgender males or cisgender females, because you know what? God is just a whole lot more creative than that. God bless God. So, people can be anywhere. So they can be here, or they can be here, or they can be here. Those of you who know they can be here, they can be here, they can be here, they can be here. They can be anywhere. There are algorithmically a million different ways of being human in terms of the intersection of sexual orientation and gender identity. So theoretically, one could be a trans male, okay, meaning somebody who identifies as male, also meaning somebody who was assigned female at birth, but a trans male is a male who's gay. Now, if your head right now is turning and you're going, no, wait a minute, that means that they don't have a penis, so how can they be gay? How does that work? If that's where your head is going, then what I would say to you is genitals do not a gender make. And if your head is going to genitals, then it's going to the wrong place. Because that's only one tiny piece of the biology of human beings. So, back to this. So, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. We've talked now about that. IAA++ begins to talk even more about the immense complexity of human beings. So intersex speaks to those individuals who are born with ambiguous sexuality, that their sex is, so to be clear, it might be somebody who was born with a small little micro penis, but also a vaginal slit. So those individuals, we used to use the word that we no longer use because it is an epithet, hermaphrodite. So we don't use that word anymore because, and I use it only to explain, because some of you are of an age where that word will have resonance. But if you are intersex, that's a bad word. It's like queer used to be. So intersex are people who have ambiguous gender identity in terms of their biology. And the problem with intersex is that one of the ways that we used to, and still do sadly, manage that issue with babies is that if a child was born with a little micropenis and a vaginal slit, doctors would simply remove the penis, tell the parents, raise the child as a female. But what's the problem with that? The problem with that, with doing that, is this, right? So now you've removed the penis, but what if that child is really male, right? So there was a client of mine, actually, she's an out intersex woman. She's ELCA. She's very involved in one of our churches, and she goes all over the country and lectures about the intersex experience because she herself had that experience where, so she raised as a female, identifies as a female because she was raised as a female, but she is intersex, and she always knew there was something wrong. And before the age of, I think 6 is what she said, she had 10 different operations, and one of them, the first, was to simply remove her penis. Her birth certificate actually had a male name on it, but when they removed her penis, then they began to call her a female name. And when she hit puberty, things got a little more complicated, as you can imagine. Because all of a sudden, this individual who was raised as a female and didn't have a penis had testosterone and androgen flooding through her system. And she experienced herself differently, couldn't understand it. It was a very difficult life for her. So now she has reclaimed her original name. So she has the name that she was raised, which is female, and the name that was on her birth certificate, which is male. And she calls herself Dawn Mark. So He's a remarkable human being. So, oops. So that's intersex, right? There are about 127 different ways that one can be intersex. Remember, there are 4 different ways that makes us biologically the gender that we are. And so there are all sorts of variations on that, and some of them are intersex. The first A, there could be another A here. That would really irritate people. So, but one of the A's stands for asexual, meaning people who simply are not sexually attracted, period, in general. The other A could stand for aromantic, which means people who are not romantically attracted to people at all. Although they may be sexually active, they may not be romantically inclined towards anybody. Another A, which I think includes all of you, is ally. So people who are allies to the LGBTQ community. And so usually when you see LGBTQIAA, that first A means ally. But it could also mean asexual or aromantic. And then there is the plus plus. And we could talk all day about people who are polysexual or polyamorous or pansexual. I believe Miley Cyrus came out recently and said that she was pansexual, which fundamentally means that she is sexually attracted to people regardless of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. So she could be sexually attracted to a trans male, a trans female, a lesbian, a gay male. That her experience of herself as a being is somebody who is sexually attracted to people regardless of their gender identity or their sexual orientation. That would be what pansexual would mean. Demisexual is a word that would mean somebody who can only be sexually attracted to someone if they're also romantically attracted to them. So, and this plus plus, again, there are many different variations on the human species in regard to our gender identity, our sexual orientation, and our gender expression. We are fearfully and wonderfully made by God in a variety of different ways. I thank God for that. You know, at least I thank God for that, because it adds endless interest to the human community. Thanks a lot for coming here today, and thanks a lot for listening today. And I hope that this is a presentation that has offered lots of ways for you to think about gender identity and sexual orientation, and to continue the discussion beyond today and God's marvelous creation. And if you have more questions, you can contact the Synod office or talk to your pastor, which is always a good place to start. So thank you so much for being here today.